Well, hello, everybody out there. Welcome to another edition of the Snap No Tap podcast with Joe Cardinal and myself. Nico's busy working, and we have a very special guest today, a guy that I got to know several years ago. Actually, he came to one of my seminars, and just one of the nicest guys, very talented martial artist and law enforcement agent. And, you know, I guess who knows what else, but we're going to find out. Joe, introduce our special guest.
Yeah, well, it's Chuck May. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's good to be here. Good to see you guys. Good to see Coach again.
Yeah, good to see you too. Hopefully soon in person, I hope.
Yeah. I've been chopping to get some more stuff from you, Tony, and not only me, but a lot of the guys I train with. They're like, this Tony Cecchine guy. We got to meet this guy. We got to.
He doesn't exist.
Tap into that. We got to tap into that knowledge base he has. So
yeah, I hope once the situation resolves here, which I don't want to get into it today because you're here, but it was a bad Monday, everybody out there with my mother. It's taken another turn where no caregiving. I'm not going to get any help. I'm not allowed to leave the house at all under any circumstance anymore, not even to go grocery shopping. They have me, in essence, almost under like a house arrest because of her condition until something breaks, until we can get some sort of aid here. But anyway, Joe, how did your EMS thing go? And then we got to start talking about Chuck.
So yeah, this weekend was my first in an ER. So you have to work a couple ER shifts and you have to work a couple ambulance shifts. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending how you look at it, it was a slow shift, relatively speaking. So there were a few patients. I got to help and assist a few things. You know, I've seen some things that I'll take with me to my grave. But, you know, the staff was great. They were very supportive. And so I think that was really kind of getting my toe in the water for what it must be like. You know, I just have a new appreciation for what ER staff have to go through. You know, I just got a little window into kind of the craziness. I mean, honestly, literally some of the stuff they had to deal with, and you know, just hats off to them for what they do for the community. You know, we can't really pay them enough for what they're doing. So far so good. I got a couple more shifts. You know, I'm not at liberty to divulge too much of what went on. I don't want to give away too much what happened with patient care, but it was definitely a worthwhile experience, and I'm still really happy to be doing it. So we'll see. So next Sunday is my next round up. So if I make it out of there, I'll be back.
Good. Well, let's get cooking with Chuck May, if you may, because it's almost May.
I know.
Well, actually, it will be May when we're filming this on Wednesday for Chuck's schedule. It will be released Sunday, May 1st. May Day, nice. Chuck May. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Nice. There must be some type of fate behind that.
Yeah, right.
So, Chuck, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago, guys. Pretty much lived here, you know, my entire life, other than a stint here or there where I've been out doing some training or some serving or stuff like that. But grew up in Chicago. Been kind of, you know, was born and raised in the city for the most part, became kind of a DuPage County guy, for those that are familiar with the Chicago area, when I started a law enforcement career. So
whereabouts in the city, like what neighborhoods?
It'd be like Belmont Cragen district.
Oh, it's where I used to live.
Yeah, I used to live on the west side there. Lived in the city till I was about 10. And that's when my parents made the foray out to the suburbs. So my parents bought a house in 1979. They're still living in that same house today.
Nice.
And you know, did the back half of my my education out here, and kind of got started on my law enforcement career when I you know, moved out to DuPage.
Now, when
So,
you're growing up, did you do any sports or any athletics?
yeah, I mean, I wrestled in high school, did the football, basketball thing, was never much of a baseball player. But, you know, high school is where I kind of got into the grappling thing. Um, I played football in high school, had no idea what wrestling was. And the school that I went to, all the football coaches were also wrestling coaches. I played basketball through junior high. Um, After my freshman season, football season was over, coaches came up and asked me what I was going to do, and I said, "Well, I think I'm going to try out for basketball." They go, "No, no, you're going to wrestle," and that's how that all got started, and just it fell in love with it. I think I also stopped growing in height wise in eighth grade too, so my basketball career was kind of cut short for that reason also. But the wrestling stuff, I really enjoyed it. And, it just kind of progressed here and there. I was involved in some martial arts here and there when I had time. And the grappling stuff just kind of always appealed to me.
I know a lot of football coaches like their athletes to wrestle because it helps keep them in shape year round pretty much.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what it was, coach. It was, the football coaches had you wrestle in the winter and then run track in the spring because
Yeah.
you could keep you in the weight room year round, and that's how they got that done. So, but it did. It was. I mean, to this day, other than maybe a little bit of gym boxing that I've done, the conditioning that I had as a wrestler in high school, unmatched with anything else that I've really done. So,
Joe, ask him. Well, go ahead. Continue with your line of questioning, Joe.
Well, I was just going to also make an observation about your point about the conditioning. I remember kind of having that rude awakening. So I didn't wrestle in high school, which I regret to this day. But I trained at the Degerberg Academy during that time, and we were doing kickboxing, which was well, I wouldn't say it was easy. We definitely worked a lot, but we had obviously it was at that time it was like high school age kids, and we had some wrestlers come in, and they just had no problem. Whatever we threw at them, they were ready for it. And they're like, gosh, we thought this martial arts thing was going to be harder. And so that was kind of one of my first tastes of, maybe I wasn't getting everything, that I thought I would be at the training, but the first impressions of what maybe wrestlers were going through. But yeah, so at what age did you decide were you one of those kids who always wanted to be a policeman, or was it something that kind of dawned on you later?
no, it kind of dawned on me. The neighborhood I grew up in, there's a lot of gang activity and stuff like that, and I just always thought, somebody should probably do something about this. And it wasn't something I always wanted to do. It's just kind of something that happened organically. As I got done doing things, it just seemed like a law enforcement career was natural for me. I went into it. I enjoyed it while I did it. Over 20 years, I enjoy not doing it anymore. Um, for a few reasons, but it's a career it's a short-lived career. You do it for 20, 25 years. I mean, it's not like working at other things. There is a shelf life on it. So I enjoyed it. It gave me a lot of life experiences, a lot of training, a lot of practical experience that I still use to this day. But it wasn't something that I always wanted to do. It was something as I got a little older. I mean, I'd thought about it, but it was something that kind of happened.
So was it like straight out of high school, or like later on that it kind of came together
No, it
for you?
wasn't. It wasn't so much out of high school. It was probably a little later on that I decided it would be, a good career for me. And it's a profession and a career that really has to be for the person, right? It's not just like working anywhere else. There's a lot of stresses involved, a lot of stresses on the job, a lot of stresses off the job. It takes a certain kind of person to be able to want to take all that pressure on and see it through to the end, if you can see it through to the end. So I thought I'd be able to do it. And, I made it to the end. I'm working in the private sector, got a lot of good memories, a lot of nice plaques and mementos hanging on the walls, but just time to do something else. And it's not something that you do, well into your 50s and 60s. It's definitely a younger person's game. So I enjoyed it.
What were some of the things that maybe like a person heading into it, like you didn't expect, the aspects of the job that you kind of didn't anticipate?
Yeah, the things you don't expect are, at least for me, I mean, I went into it expecting that, you're going to have to deal with bad guys. You're going to have to physically deal with them, legally deal with them. I also went into it, after talking to a few people that have been doing it for a while, understanding that, there's home life pressures. You work nights, weekends, you work long hours, you see a lot of stuff you shouldn't see. And I made the commitment right when I started that I would never bring any of that stuff home. What I really wasn't ready for was kind of it's pitched as a brotherhood, and it is a brotherhood for some people. There are people that I work with that I literally trusted my life to and would still trust my life to, but it's also a profession, right? It's competitive. There are people that, want things that you want positions you want titles that you want, things like that. So ultimately, it's still a workplace. And that part kind of caught me by surprise after I've been doing it a couple of years. And that was something that I wasn't ready for. And just the outside pressures, it's probably a profession that's more scrutinized than, I don't know, maybe any other profession, other than possibly being, a politician. I don't know. I haven't run into people out in the real world in my nearly 53 years that, no matter who you run into and what their life experience or education is, everybody knows what a police officer should do, is supposed to do, should have done in this situation. I wasn't kind of, ready for that either. Didn't think about that till I'd been on the job for a little while. So it's definitely a profession that's a little bit different from all the others, which is one of the things that I liked about it, right? You showed up to work every day, you had no idea what you're going to be doing that day. So that's some of the appeal to it.
It's an interesting take where you say, in essence, the rivalry or they want the job that, or the thing that you're looking for. And I had a friend of mine named Jerry Cronin who sadly passed away in 2007, Christmas Day. He was a Chicago cop for 28 years. He probably would have stayed on. He had cancer and they had to remove part of his neck and, on the left side and everything. But his thing was kind of almost the opposite, where people were prompting him to take the sergeant's test and all this. He was just happy being a patrolman. He loved it. And that was his thing. But believe me, Jerry was a hard-nosed guy. Because like you said, and Joe's getting a taste of this now. You start to see things, you're not going to forget what you see, right? You're going to carry them around for the rest of your life, and that kind of does things to you.
Yeah, and people, I mean, that's one of the things where people that don't experience that type of stuff, you're not supposed to experience that kind of stuff, right? It's just not human nature. So most people that end up in the profession grow up kind of, in a normal middle class, lower middle class household. And as you're growing up, you get this idea of what home life is like. And then you get out into the world and you're in everybody's business, and you start to realize everybody's version of home life is not the same as your version of home life or what you think it should be. So you start seeing things that you're not, you didn't grow up seeing, most of us. And you got to either come up with some coping mechanisms so you can not only deal with it, but keep doing your job effectively. And that's one of the things, that's probably one of the primary things that people that don't do that, don't have to experience that stuff every day, kind of think they know how they would deal with it, but you don't, because you don't see it every day. The biggest example I use, Coach, is for years I was on a task force where I worked child pornography cases, right?
Oh,
I'm a
man.
father. I got 3 kids. You look at stuff that a human being just isn't supposed to look at least a normal human being, right? And you got to come up with coping mechanisms to deal with that so it doesn't affect you in other areas of your life. I think I was always pretty good at it. I never had any problems, no ill effects for any of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see stuff like that and you see it over and over and over, it's not something that, it's trauma. It's repeated trauma. And it's not something that a human being is really supposed to deal with all the time, right? I read a study because I stay up on use of force stuff, just for the law enforcement aspect, the legal aspect, the martial arts instructor aspect. I've read several studies here recently where it says that most people will experience like one or two traumatic events throughout their lifetime. And a police officer with a 25-year career on average will experience like 3,600.
Wow.
So it's just something that, you know, that's why it's not for everybody. And there's aspects in the job that aren't for everybody. I knew guys and women that were fantastic street cops, but say they got put into an undercover unit. Well, that aspect of it just wasn't for them. They just couldn't deal with it. There's just, you know, when I was a detective, you know, men and women that were fantastic street cops or fantastic undercover cops or tactical cops would be assigned a detective badge and given a caseload. They couldn't deal with the caseload. So there's different aspects to it. Some people can deal with some and not others. It's just kind of a job as you're going through your career, you kind of have to feel your way through it. It's the best way I can describe it. And when I was a field training officer, I used to explain to my trainees, I'm like, look, this is like owning a McDonald's franchise. You decide what you want to do with it. You know, some guys want to sell hamburgers, some guys want to sell egg McMuffins, some guys just want to run the playland. You figure out what you want to do with it. I know guys who are great cops. They were in the uniform in the mobile office for 25 years, loved it, did a great job with it, never had any aspirations. That's fine. That's part of the job. You know, other people wanted to do things right away. I had my first detective badge 2 years on the job because I liked patrol when I first started, but for me personally, I kind of grew out of it pretty quick. So it's a career where you can choose some different paths.
Were you in a municipality, state police, county
Yeah,
police?
I did. I worked for a town in DuPage County. So I was a municipal police officer, but I was assigned to different things over the years. So I was assigned to some countywide task forces, some state task forces, some federal task forces. I worked with everything from when I was doing the child pornography and the grooming cases that was done through the Attorney General's office here in the state of Illinois.
Okay.
I was on something in DuPage County called the Major Crimes Task Force. We came out and helped everybody with their homicides and their officer involved shootings or officer involved uses of lethal force or anything else that a chief or an administrator would want help with. I was assigned to some federal task forces for a while. Primarily, I was a task force officer with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the Chicago Field Division here for a few years, and then worked with them for several years after that. I'm in the private sector. I'm still working with those guys. So I got the opportunity. Some of it was luck and some of it was, you know, the work product that I put out to do a bunch of different things. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it seems like you've had a varied,
It was
very varied career, right?
It was. I like to change things up every few years and try something new. So
Well, you know what, and this is not towards you at all, but it's just a thought that popped in my head when you said, you know, you found your coping mechanisms. Well, I've known many police officers through the years. However, I personally have never known someone before they became a police officer. Okay. I've always known them when they were pretty much well into their career. As a matter of fact, I dated two female police officers, and they were not recruits. They were already established too. So for me, I've never been able to tell, because all the coppers that I knew were kind of like, they were great guys. They were all my friends, but they were serious, like, you know, oh. So I don't know if they were always like that or if they were happy-go-lucky before they joined the force, and then through the 25 or however many years they were on the force, their personalities change. I can't answer. I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
Your personality will change. It kind of has to a little bit. I mean, it doesn't mean, the guys that I work with, you know, and the people that I work with that I enjoyed working with, you know, we were always grab assing. We were always goofing around with each other, always joking with each other. But you do have to, first of all, you have to be professional. So you can't be like that all the time, right? In certain situations, some of the stuff you're dealing with is pretty serious. You're dealing with crime victims. You're dealing with people that, you know, joking around is the last thing that they need. You know, they need you to provide professional services, answer their questions, help them out with their problems. So you do kind of have that on and off switch where,
Uh-huh.
when you're with the guys, you're screwing around. When you're in your professional mode, you're in your professional mode. I always found that most of the guys and most of the people that I work with, it was the same. I mean, we goofed around, we joked with each other. When it was time to work, it was time to work. And when it was time to stop working, we stopped working and started goofing around again, But you do have to get, people call it jaded. I don't know if that's the right term, but you do have to get a little bit of that. You have to realize that everybody's not your friend. And that's an unfortunate thing that you have to learn, but you got to learn that. You got to learn it pretty quick. I got 2 nephews, that are on the job now. One's here in the Chicagoland area and one's down in the Dallas, Texas area. When they were getting ready to go, it's the first thing I told them. I go, you got to realize there's a whole bunch of things that you're going to have to learn. One of the things you got to learn is not everybody's your friend. And it's a little different than like an office setting or something like that I work in now. So you just got to know what you're going into as you go into it. You don't wind up with any surprises.
And that carries over to your martial arts and street self-defense. I harp on it, not only on this podcast, but probably on some of my videos too, that, when shit hits the fan, you have to expect that nobody's going to be on your side. Nobody's going to be your friend. They're going to be against you. You got to go in there knowing that,
Right. No, you are 100% correct. They're either going to be against you physically. They're going to be against you in the courtroom. They're going to be against you when, they call you to come and arrest the husband or the boyfriend because they can't stand whatever the husband or boyfriend's doing at that time. And then when you got the probable cause and make the arrest, you have to understand that they're going to turn on you immediately because that's their husband or their boyfriend. So you have all kinds of those scenarios. You just have to be prepared to deal with them. Not everybody's your friend.
Yeah.
People view you as different things. There's even times in my career coach where I've been out like in a social setting and people ask me what I do for a living and I tell them I'm a plumber or something like this. So I don't have to listen to, I have to listen to about how their cousin in South Dakota got a ticket and it's somehow my fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You kind of learn that, it might be you or it might be the profession, but not everybody's your friend.
Yeah. I get that too. When, like doctors, too, they're another one who, people tend to try to pick their brain, I guess you'd say, and then, bitch and complain. And it's like, hey, I'm not treating you. I'm not the guy who's treating you,
Yeah.
take it up with your actual doctor. And so, yeah, I guess I could see how you'd get the blame for stuff that, you're not even involved in.
Yeah. Along the martial arts, self-defense, use of force lines, that's one of the biggest areas, probably not the biggest area, every time something happens, people know what I used to do. I don't do it anymore. I did it for well over 2 decades, but I don't do it anymore. But if there's some type of, use of force, a lethal use of force or something that looks bad, whether it's bad or not, it might look bad to the average person, but that reflects back on everybody that's in the profession or has been in the profession. So, for example, there's a shooting that just took place in Michigan, somewhere in Michigan, a couple weeks ago. I haven't even seen the video of this thing, but I have people ask me, why did this happen? And why would you do this? I didn't do anything. I wasn't in Michigan. You know what I mean? So you get a lot of that kind of stuff. The martial arts instruction, people know what I do or used to do for a living. And a lot of people, that's one of the actual draws when people come, to study with me. It's like, hey, I know you've been in these situations, but I also, the legal ramifications of doing this or doing that. And that's one of the draws, but people also know what I used to do for a living. So they go, hey, why would a guy do this? Or I have no idea. I wasn't there. I wasn't in that situation. So, everybody's a little different.
That's right.
I don't know what they were thinking at the time. I don't know what was going on. I don't know what was said, what was around. Videos don't always tell the whole story. So I do get that kind of feedback, just because
years ago, I agree. And, I remember years ago, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but let's just say that there was a cop. This was not a friend of mine, but he made the comment to me about, well, you're a big dude, you're a big guy. And I'm like, you know what? Stop. Now you're stereotyping me. All right. Now this was just us talking. This wasn't a scene or anything. We were just, he was off duty and he was just talking. I'm like, no, 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 no. So kind of like with you, everybody reacts differently. Well, my size, don't prejudge how I would react to a situation. You don't
Right.
know. The guy never knew me. The guy never met me before. So it wasn't like he kind of knew me.
Yeah.
He knew of me because neighborhood cop, neighborhood scenario. But yeah, that's the thing. I try to tell people in the street or civilians, like for a street self-defense scenario, every situation is going to be different because they'll ask me, like they'll see a crime video, something on YouTube, and once in a blue moon, even Joe might ask me, well, what do you think this guy did? Well, first of all, I wasn't there. We're only probably seeing part of the video. I may have handled it differently, but that doesn't mean that this guy handled it improperly. It just depends on his life experiences and shit.
Yeah, and it's training too, right? We talk about training, and I've learned a lot about training through all the instructors I've had in my career and in my private life, including yourself. If you train for things, right, you might handle things a little bit differently. So when I answer some of those questions, I kind of answer them in generalities. So I go, well, you don't know what the person's training is. You don't know what's going on. For example, people talk a lot about, how officers are quick to go to a firearm. Well, there's a reason for that. It's that's all they've trained in. So, when you're under stress, you resort to whatever your training is. Guys and women that I've trained with over the years in the profession that train in something, catch wrestling. And do I promote catch wrestling for law enforcement? I promote that as hard as I possibly can. I tell people all the time, to this day, I'm like, I found catch wrestling later in my career. Boy, do I wish I had it from day one. It would have been great. But, I go, people you fall to the level of your training. You fall back on what you know. So if all you know is to pull a gun out of a holster when you're under stress, that's what you're going to do. Officers, men and women that have trained in other things, well, they fall back to the catch or the MMA or the boxing or whatever it is that they have that kind of background. I've also kind of seen in my career where when people do train, the stress level doesn't jump up as high as fast because they've been even if it's been in the gym, they've been in that situation before. They've been training. Things just kind of slow down a little bit and they're a little bit more confident if something does look like it's starting to go sideways, that they'll be able to handle it. And that goes for the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, everybody that's done any kind of hands-on training. The sad part about it is officers just don't train. That's the truth of it. They just don't train. The department doesn't train them. The agencies don't train them. You got to do it on your own or you're not going to do it. It's just not going to happen.
That's really tragic. That really should
Yeah.
be, all this, I don't want to get political or whatever, but all this talk about reform or whatever, if we could just put more money and allow them to have more time, like you said, just having that exposure to just be a little bit more confident. It seems like the obvious, an obvious help to the situation to contribute more to that. And I just wish there was more awareness of that and people being vocal about that.
Yeah, it's hard, Joe, because budgets are limited, time is limited. Even if you're going to do it on, we used to say you got to do it on your own time, on your own dime. But when you get in that profession, you're working day and night, weekdays, weekends, holidays, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and you still got to come home and mow the lawn and do all that stuff. It's hard to find time, but you have to do it. It's part of the job. You just have to find it somehow, somewhere. It just helps you do your job more effectively, more safely.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I could not agree with you more. I used to have my own thoughts on it. I'm not going to get into it because they're actually ridiculous, really kind of pie in the sky as far as police things. But one thing I always used to say is if you have the ability, which is all I ever strove for, to be able to kill somebody, deadly force, let's use that term, with just your bare hands, then you're going to be less apt to, like you say, want to use the gun because it's like when I used to run sprints in high school, and I'm out for a leisurely jog with some other track guy. I know that I can light him up if I took off running, but we're just jogging. It's nice and easy. It's very relaxed. And that's the same way when you have the empty hand skills where you know you can take this man's life. It's very easy to hold back. But when you don't know that you can take their life and you think, you basically know that you can't, that's when the panic sets in, man. And that's when you start to freak out. So
I'll tell you, Coach, I've been in situations where just training in the gym on the other end of it, right? You know that if you get punched, that's not the end of a fight. It could be, right? But it's probably not going to be. So that you also don't get that type of panic, right? Where if the guy immediately touches me, I'm going to lose some fight. It's going to, I've literally been hit by guys on the street. And I'm like, that's it. I mean, that's what we were waiting for this whole time. So you do get that. You do also, I don't want to call it a calmness, but you just get that, all right, I've been here before. I know what's going to happen here. We're going to deal with this and then we're going to move on. And if I do have to escalate it, I'll escalate it. And, that's the big thing with the use of force thing, right? You got to recognize a threat and meet it with the same level of force. And then as something scales up or down, you have to realize that you got to scale up or down with it. I mean, that's the money part of it, right? That's the big call. You got to recognize the threat for what it is, and you got to respond to it appropriately. And as it goes up and down, because it's going to, you got to go up and down with it. And you also get that kind of feel for things when you're training, because you know how it is. You train with some guys and you're kind of rolling easy, or you're sparring and you're kind of sparring easy. Then all of a sudden somebody gets one in and it gets a little competitive and the pace picks up a little bit. And, you've been there before, you know how that stuff is going to go. So you don't get rattled by it immediately. That's why I advocate everybody should find something and train in it. I don't care what it is. I advocate the catch and the Krav because that's what worked for me. I've also done some traditional jujitsu stuff and it worked for me too. But everybody's got to find their own thing, but they should find something.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's a retired Cook County sheriff. He used to be my exact next door neighbor before I moved out here. And I trained him too. And his son is actually on one of my videos. But he was a Tang Sudo guy his whole life. And that, like you said, that's what worked for him. Then the grappling, when he got to meet me when I moved in and started working out at my gym in Bensonville. He's retired now. He retired roughly a year ago. And from Cook County, they have a different setup. 30 years and 60 years. You got to be 30 years on a job, 60 years old, for your maximum pension. So he stayed on for that. But I agree. Everybody needs, and even civilians, okay, they need, especially, people who are a little more terrified of things right now. They should do something, anything, even if it's not even martial arts. Yeah. Even if it's just exercise, going to the gym and losing that 40 or 50 pounds or whatever, that'll make them feel a little more confident and think clearer.
Yep, absolutely. Or just get with somebody that knows, how real world situations unfold and gain some situational awareness. You can look at people and go, okay, that guy's okay. That guy's okay. That guy there might be a problem. Let me stay away from him. That kind of stuff. That helps out a lot. At least I believe it does. I think everybody should be able to defend themselves or be less victims in the world. But, you can't force everybody to train.
No, you can't. But I agree about the awareness and, hanging out with people like yourself or myself or others that, there's a whole different world than, the sport world. Nothing against the sport world, but, that's not what you need. You need real world. I just got an email from a guy. I don't know who he is, never met him, but and he caught me on a bad day too. He caught me right as after the county lady left. So I was kind of venting about shit because he was talking about meeting me, and I'm like, you're probably not going to meet me for a long time. I'm dealing with my mother, and it's a bad scene. But he even said too in the email that I don't want to mention the style. I don't want to pinpoint or anything, but it's not really geared towards reality fighting? And I'm like, yes, it isn't, right? So right away, the guy and I clicked because of that. You just have to realize the difference. And there is a big difference. People try to sometimes think there isn't.
There is. And, we, in a Krav class, we'll run drills in level 1. The students will just hit pads and stuff like that. And they get really good and real comfortable with throwing punches and stuff like that. And then we get in level 2, we up the threat levels with each level. So we have one particular drill that we run in level 2. We call it the eye opener. We'll put the students will pair up and one will be flat on the ground. And the other one will get in the mount and they'll be sparring. And the person in the mount that has, a dominant position for their skill level. Then we have a second person come in and grab the person in the mount and pull them off. Now there's 2 people punching on the person flat on their back that used to be in the mount. And that's the one out of all the drills we run on all the levels. When we pull the students are like, that's the one that lets us see, oh man, this is what this is really like. I got the mount, I'm wailing away, but then all of a sudden the buddy comes behind and starts choking me or pulls me off and I got 2 people beating on me. That's kind of the difference in the sport training versus the real world training. There's value in sport training, at least gives you something, right?
Mhm.
But you just have to do it, in my opinion, you just got to do what works for you. I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu for a little while and it was okay when I was in my shorts and my t-shirt or my gi. But when I went in there with a vest and a duty belt on and I couldn't do half the stuff because I had a double stack pistol sticking out of one side and a taser and a radio sticking out of the other. And I couldn't turn on the ground and stuff like that. Or we get into we do a lot of small room fighting in our upper levels. When you're basically in a hallway where you can't even draw your arm back to throw a punch because your elbow's hitting the wall, all that kind of stuff. It just has to be factored in if you're going to use it for real world self-defense. If sport fighting, I know a lot of sport fighters and they're good fighters and
They are.
they train for their situations, to fight in a cage or whatever. Mine was always a little bit different. I like martial arts. It is, I consider it a hobby and all that, but I got involved in it more for the practical aspect because I needed it for the jobs that I had. So, and to this day, I tell everybody my 2 goals when I was actually working was I wanted to learn self-defense and law enforcement control. And then as I became an instructor over the years, I go, I not only want to learn those 2 things, but I want to be able to teach those 2 things to other people. And that's still my martial arts goals to this day.
Well,
So,
you're very gifted. I can tell you that. One of the things that, I've,
it's all that Tony C training, man.
no,
I pulled
no.
that stuff out more than once. So
Well, you're a gifted. Well, the thing is you're analytical. Okay. So people out there, I'm going to talk about Chuck for a while here now. So when I met Chuck, okay, let me backtrack. So when I used to teach seminars, basically I'm going to paint with a brush. You have 2 kinds of people. I'm going to narrow it down that when you're done showing the technique and now it's time for the students to practice. There's 2 types of people. There's the people who are going to keep on practicing until you have to tell them, stop, we got to move on. And then there's the others that are going to practice it 2 or 3 times and then just sit around and watch and do nothing. Okay. Chuck's the type that will just keep on practicing. And then the only time he's going to stop is if he has a question. He'll call you over. Wrong or right, Chuck, you know that. That's how you are. He's a very intelligent and his brain's always going. You could tell that he's trying to take what I'm showing for a bunch of people and he's trying to figure out how am I going to apply this specifically for my needs, which may be different than the guy in the corner who wants to use this to win the next submission grappling tournament or boxing tournament. So that's awesome about Chuck. I've known that, and I knew that the very first time you came to one of my seminars. I watch for that shit. I see who's really into it and who's just there just to be there. And you're there.
It was great, man. All that time training at the gym in Bensonville and at the seminars and that stuff I did use, that stuff came in. It was practical. I used it out in the world. When I retired, I left the police department. I worked in the private sector for a while. I went to work for a sheriff's office for a year. And then I left there. But while I was working for the sheriff's office, just one example, we had a guy rush out of a cell as a nurse was trying to give him some medication, and he wound up going to the ground with one of the deputies. And I walked up, guy was laying on his belly, and I walked up and just put a step over toe hold on him. And I was standing there holding him, and I had complete control of him. And other deputies came rushing up, and they were just looking at me. They're like, what are you doing? I go, it's a step over toe hold. They're like, what? It's a what? It's a what? I go, hey, just handcuff him and we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, right.
And then the deputy that wound up at the cell door getting tackled and going to the ground with this guy, he had to write the use of force report. He must have called me 4 or 5 times that night. He's like, what was that called?
Yeah.
You know, a step over toe hold. And he's like, well, how did you do that? You know, so, but the guys were looking at me like, what was like some kind of magic trick, you know, but it came in handy because it helped me accomplish a task without throwing a punch or without using some type of weapon, even a less lethal weapon.
Yeah.
Didn't need it. Stepped over the guy, wrapped his leg around my leg, my thigh, twisted his leg, and had control of him and got him to put his arms behind his back. The stuff came in handy, and not even handy. It was practical. It was useful. It was stuff I could use. And I knew that from the first time I got exposed to catch. And then as I studied over the years with a couple of different people, you primarily, I'm like, this is it, man. This is it. Because I'd try systems out, you know, over the years, and I'd compare them to what I needed to do at work. And I'd go, yeah, this ain't going to help me at all. This is kind of a waste of time and money. Catch wrestling, I'm still doing it to this day. And I still do it in class, and I show stuff, and people are like, wow, you know, where
Well,
did
I
you
hope to
learn
come
that?
back and do a seminar for you guys. Once things settle here, I keep saying that, but
Oh, man.
you know how it is. You have family members that are
Yeah.
going through a similar thing, but no, the thing is getting the control of your own body before you can control somebody else's. And it's not about learning moves. So many times through the years, people want to see a new hold, or you see people on YouTube coming up with holds. Well, that's not the way to do it. It's about mastering the fundamentals, because you got to improvise. As you know, no one in any gym ever, anywhere, probably on planet Earth, ever encountered that exact situation that you just mentioned, where a deputy got tackled and you're showing up to throw the hold on. See? But you were able to understand the principles enough to say, oh, okay, well, boom, here it is. And that's the secret. And you've already tapped into that. You get that. You're creative enough. And that's the biggest thing I try to teach everybody, to learn to be creative, learn to be how to improvise, so that you can create on the fly when the instructor's not there. So that's just, a lot of people wouldn't be able to do what you did.
Yeah. And I try to harp on that with the guys that, you know, I teach, because that's how it goes. Nothing is perfect in the real world, right?
Right.
2 catch wrestling coaches, and, you know, both of you guys have harped on this, lock flows. Why? Because, well, the first lock and the flow might be the high percentage, but you're not going to get it 100% of the time. And that's what happens in the real world. You know, you go for something and the guy pulls us, or whatever happens. Sometimes you're not fighting with people in an open space. It's in a hallway, or it's in the back seat of a car, or it's in a cell, or wherever it winds up being, in between 2 cars in a parking lot. You got to be able to go, okay, well, there's certain stuff that I could use in an open space. It ain't going to work here. So let's just scrap all that right away and go to the stuff that does work. And that's, you know, I've been fortunate, you know, I've had some really good instructors throughout my lifetime, and you definitely being one of them.
Thank you.
You know, Eric Paulson being another one. I study all his material. I study all your material. I've got his DVDs, your DVDs. I go to your guys' seminars. I did the private training with you. I've done some training with him. If for me personally, if I see something that's going to help me do those 2 things, you know, learn self-defense, learn law enforcement control, and teach that to other people, then I'm on board. And that's what it's been with the catch wrestling. But I've also been lucky enough to have really good coaches, you know, really good coaches that know what they're doing, really good coaches that know how to teach people things. Because it's like anything else, right? It's like having a math teacher. They might know all the math in the world, but if they don't know how to teach it to you, it's really kind of useless, right? It's good for them. It doesn't help me out at all. So I've been lucky in that aspect. You know, I've been able to find some good coaches.
Yeah, I've been lucky too. And a lot of people can't say that, you know, they just run into people, and
Yeah.
Then years go by and they're like, well, shit, I wasted my prime training with this guy and I could have been with somebody else. But when I make my comeback, I'm going to be focusing strictly on stuff that nobody's seen, kill shots, just different things. It's a whole stuff that I've held on to for a long period of time. I realize now that I don't have that much time left to share this information, and it's information that has not been revealed. I haven't seen anybody else.
Well,
And I want to do that if I can get through this with my mother.
we've got a group waiting for you, Coach, because
Where are you at?
Glen Ellen.
Okay.
So what we do is we teach at the Krav school, but we also got a group of guys and women. I keep saying guys, just meaning
Yeah.
people. A really good group that gets together and also just works out outside of class. And one of the things we do is we've been lucky enough we have a wrestling room at North Central College that we go to one Sunday a month. And we do some of the grappling stuff at the school. We do the grappling stuff in the wrestling room. We've actually been there. You're talking about the wrestlers. We go over to North Central College. Some Sundays we'll run into some of the wrestlers, like the collegiate wrestlers over there, the men and the women. And both teams are just ridiculous sets of athletes. We'll go in there, we'll work out with them, and they just, they run circles around us because of the conditioning and the knowledge that they have. But it's good because you also learn something from them too. But I constantly harp on, both my catch wrestling coaches, and I'll walk in to the Krav school and everybody's like, hey, Tony Cecchine, where is he? When's he coming in? Because they're just dying. They're dying to meet you and work out with you and get the stuff. So
They will pay like grasshopper, patience. I'm stuck. Literally, I cannot leave. Now, I don't know where this North Central College is. I never heard of it.
Naperville.
Okay. No, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's out in Naperville. It's a 4-year school. So they've got all the collegiate sports and they got a nice facility. And one of the guys who's a student at the Krav school, but also he's had a prominent career in law enforcement. He's a retired deputy chief from one department, a retired chief from another department. And he also runs a security company, like a teaching type company that I do some training with and some teaching with him. His name's Ray McGurry, and he owns this company called RJM Strategy Group that I help him do some training through. Through his contacts, he helped us get this wrestling because we went over there to teach like a self-defense seminar, like a basic self-defense seminar. We're supposed to teach it in the gym. The basketball teams are working out in there. The guy that runs the facility, the athletic director, took us up and showed us the wrestling room, and we were all like, man, how do we get this thing?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, we'll work something out one Sunday a month. And Ray was able to make that happen. And we go there one Sunday a month. It's just a bunch of people that get together to work out. It's a fantastic facility. We have a lot of fun. Sometimes we actually run into the collegiate wrestlers there and they'll show us some stuff. And, that's just kind of how this stuff grows organically. You get this good mix of people together, from all these different walks of life. Everybody enjoys working out together. You get some good instructors, some good collegiate wrestling athletes, or maybe even one of the coaches. One of the Sundays I was there, I think one of the coaches was in there, like the women's wrestling team coach, and he was running the guys through some stuff. So it's just kind of, just kind of one of those things where everybody gets along and everybody gets together and everybody picks something up and takes something away from it.
Are you still at the same Krav school
Yes.
that I did a seminar at?
Yep.
So where would I be going? To the Krav school or Naperville?
Wherever you wanted.
Oh, I see.
Guys, hey, the students are all like, when can we get Coach Tony in here? I go, as soon as he says as soon as he gives me a green light. So
Yeah.
You want to come to the school, you want to come to the room, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. That's cool. So let's talk about, let me ask a question now. How did you get involved in Krav?
In Krav, how did I get involved in Krav? It was something I wanted to do for a while. And Scott Lorenz, the guy that owns DuPage Krav Maga, the school that I teach at, opened his first school in the town that I worked in. And he stopped in the police department one day with a bunch of flyers and dropped them off at the front desk. And one of the dispatchers came and threw them in the lunchroom. And I was off that day. I was at the range the indoor range we had, shooting with a guy who I did traditional martial arts with. And we walked into the lunchroom and saw these flyers and we're like, oh, we got to go see this. And that's how that all got started. We just showed up one day, and 12, 13 years later, whatever it's been, I'm still around. So,
Do you know that we've known each other at least half that time? Because my
Yeah.
gym's going to be gone 5 years in July.
Yeah.
And I've known you at least a couple years before then, I think.
Yeah.
So shit, 7 years.
yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I tell people stories about the old Bensonville workouts. We'd go upstairs, you'd be on the mats, and people would track, metal shavings from the metal shop, and you'd be rolling around the mats picking the metal shavings. And I'm like, that was like the greatest thing ever. It was like working, it was like, just one of those things where you're like, hey man, you look back on it, you're like, wow, that was an experience, so, but a lot of good material in that too.
Yeah, I
Picked up
miss
a lot of good stuff.
I know, and you should have been with us 25 years ago at the tool and die shop. Oh, Triton was kind of when I was coaching out of Triton, that was like our driving a Lamborghini. I mean,
Yeah.
big wrestling room and all of that. But yeah, I missed the Bensonville thing, and it was never utilized as much as it should have been. Because I had a lot of ideas, like I wanted to do like a sleepover kind of thing where, we just did a Friday night to Sunday afternoon nonstop workout, because I had the showers there and all that, you've been there.
Yeah.
But no, see, what's interesting to me is I met some old police officers, like when I was a young man, because when I was in Cleveland, I thought about maybe becoming a cop. And some of the old time police officers, they were friends of my grandfather, World War II era guys. So their martial art experience was basically the leg trips, the foot trips, the combative army, military stuff, and not really martial arts. Then I met a couple of, like, let's say Vietnam era guys, cops. They were into the martial arts. They did, the guys that I knew did predominantly Kempo. Okay. Which, it worked for them, but now, there's so many martial arts to draw from, different styles, and, there's no reason and there's schools, plenty of schools. So there's no reason for people not to train in it, in something.
No. And coach, I mean, the thing that drew me to Krav Maga is I wanted the practical aspect of it, because, there's times where you have to draw a weapon or retain a weapon or use a baton or, all that type of stuff. And there's all these different scenarios that you have to train for. Well, when I was doing Tang Sudo, roundhouse kicking somebody in the head didn't answer every single scenario that I was in. As a matter of fact, what drew me to the catch wrestling primarily was the primary type of use of force that you wind up in working in law enforcement. You end up in all of them, all different kinds of them. I mean, I've had guns held to my head when I was working undercover and all that kind of nonsense. But the primary one is wrestling with people. The people that are like active resistors, where they're just kind of pushing away and running away from you and trying to avoid getting handcuffed and all that kind of stuff. And as soon as I got exposed to catch wrestling, I'm like, I need that too. I got the Krav Maga, I need that too. So those two systems put together work well for me personally.
The big thing with you, or guys like, not you specifically, but when people reach, like bad guys, when they're reaching for you for whatever reason, maybe they're going for the gun, maybe they're going for just you. Anytime they expose, there's the arm locks ready to happen, and those are illegal. I'm pretty certain in any municipality. I understand there's issues, and there always was issues with chokeholds, but we're not going to get into that today. But the point is, grappling and transitioning, learning to transition from an arm lock down to a leg lock to a head crank or whatever. That's the difference. That's how I look at things. When you talk about flowing, or I call it chain wrestling, I don't just chain the limb. I don't go top wrist lock, straight arm, double wrist lock. I'm going top wrist lock to the leg or to the neck, whatever's open. And that's what's great for the law enforcement, or like me, when I used to bounce and do bodyguarding, same shit. People are coming at you, or not at me, but at the person I'm trying to protect. Man, it's like duck soup, man. It's simple to get these guys and tie them up, and then you got them and
Yeah. I
take them
can't,
away.
I should have some of the people I train with come on and tell you that they wish they had $1 for every time they heard me say, take what the guy gives you. Don't fight for something that isn't there, because that's, I'm repeating, basically what Tony Cecchine and Eric Paulson have taught me. Take what the guy gives you. If the guy's going to hide his arm but hand you a leg, take that. Learn some stuff from, and it just worked well for me. I tell people all the time too, and I'm not kidding. I'm like, man, I wish I had catch wrestling from day one in my law enforcement career. That would have saved a lot of punches from being thrown, a lot of taser use, all that kind of stuff, because it's just too effective.
Well, that's a good point. I've said this to other people, not necessarily even just police officers, but when you know this stuff, the amount of times that a police officer is going to have to use a lethal weapon is going to go down, because they're the lethal weapon in essence. It's just my way of thinking. I had to learn this because, unlike you guys, I was never allowed to carry a gun as a civilian to shoot somebody on the streets. I mean, things are maybe different now, but it wasn't like that in the 70s and 80s and whatever. And I'm glad it wasn't, because I don't need some guy that gets a concealed carry permit, never goes to the range and tries to shoot a bad guy and ends up shooting an innocent bystander. I don't need that either, but I want to be able to control it. I'm glad that I was able to help, but let me tell you, it's like a mutual thing, because your enthusiasm is one thing. A lot of people are enthusiastic, but a lot of people can't make the mental connection with taking their enthusiasm and turning it into something functional. And for those that cannot do that, many of them become frustrated and quit, or they turn their enthusiasm into just becoming more or less a fan. When I think if somebody's having a hard time pulling stuff off, like you're telling your police officer friends, if they give you an arm, take the arm. If they give you a leg, take the leg. At least you're having those conversations with them. Okay. And anybody that's in the listening audience or watching this on YouTube, if you have a good coach and you just find it frustrating that the shit you're learning isn't working, just have a discussion with your coach privately. Pull him off or her off to the side and say, hey, what's happening here? Because I don't want to see anybody lose their enthusiasm. I'm sure you were the same with police work. A cop might have had a bad day. He might have had something go wrong. And all of a sudden you see this person like wanting to throw their career away. I'm sure you'd be the type that would stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, let's talk about this.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too, coach, where you have to, no matter what you're doing, you have to know there's going to be roadblocks, right? If it was easy, everybody would do it. So when you hit one, you got to push past it a little bit. But if you're having trouble, that's what an instructor is for. Hey, why would you do this? Or how would I do this? One of the things that I don't know if I did it consciously or subconsciously, but like when we were trained together, everything you showed me, for the most part, I'd go here. First time you showed me a standing top wrist lock, double wrist lock, I immediately thought, well, that's a defense and a control for somebody, weapon grab, all that kind of stuff. So I try to throw that out there, and my instructors have done that, for the most part over the years too. Here's how you do this. If you're having trouble with it, you don't want to see anybody quit, but you also have to hit the middle ground there and go, well, it is a perishable skill. You do have to train it. You do have to repeat it. I can't, as great as all the 1 hour, self-defense seminars are, you're not going to learn how to fight in an hour. Just not going to happen. We can teach you some situational awareness and stuff that you can learn in an hour, stuff to look out for and indicators, but you got to work at it a little bit. That's why it's something worth having. If anybody could just do it on the fly, everybody would have it. It really wouldn't be anything worth having. So I try to stress that. My instructors have always stressed that with me too. You got to go back, you got to train. I mean, we trained for a long time, and we would repeat stuff. It's not like if I came to a session with you and you showed me a wrist lock or a toe hold, and then 2 months later we repeated the same thing, you don't go, wait a minute, we already did that once before. Yeah, once.
Yeah.
You don't get anything doing it once. You gotta, you gotta work on your stuff. So
I had a music teacher. As a matter of fact, the guy that was playing the accordion on all of the introductions to this podcast. And once he was like a father figure to me too. And he once told me, I could show you everything you need to know to develop your technique. This is musically, we're speaking, in 3 days. But it's going to take you 3 years to get that technique. Okay. And he was right. So it's the time that you have to put in. And so many times in my line of work, via email or through the years, people would always want to be like, show me something new, show me something new. Well, goddamn, you haven't even done the basics yet.
Right.
You haven't mastered the simplest of moves. You're not, you can't keep going on and on. You're going to suck. So, but I remember Jerry telling me that, I could show you everything you need to know in 3 days, but it'll take you 3 years, to get good at it. And he really that wasn't a figure of speech, really. That's about right. It takes years to develop technique. Same with us. The difference here is what we're doing. You used a good word, perishable. Yeah, we have an expiration date. Musically, you can last 50, 60 years. Physically, what we do, we have a short window of where our prime is, and then everything after that is struggling to try to keep the decay from getting too out of hand, the erosion.
Yeah, and
It definitely takes maintenance. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's also a skill where, you know what, I can work on a stop or toe hold, for 5 years, every day, and be able to put it on somebody in my sleep. And then if I don't revisit that for 5 more years,
Yeah,
when
goodbye.
the rust sets in, yeah, I might be able to do it under stress, but I might also not be able to do it under stress because I just haven't done it in 5 years. That's kind of, I tell people, I'm like, and everybody's pretty receptive. I never really get anybody that's like, no, I got it down the first time. I go, hey, even when I'm teaching them the basics for as long as I've been doing something like catch, I'm like, it's good for me too, because I'm running through all of my stuff. Doesn't matter that I've been doing it for however many years, 7 years, 8 years, whatever it's been. I still need to run through it. I still need to get the feel for that, the position and where it's at. Am I going to be able to get this leg easy, or am I going to have to fight for it? If so, I'm going to abandon that and go to whatever he's giving me. It's just something that needs to be worked on. It's no different than anything else, shooting, you name it. It's, we work a lot on that too. And, there are people out there, not anybody that I train with, but there are people out there that go to the range once or twice in their life and they think they can, just do whatever needs to be done in any scenario. And that's not even close to being the truth. You got to put some time in. And if it's something worth having, you got to put the time in to get it. Otherwise, everybody'd have it. So,
I agree, and I think one of the shortcut, and I don't want to use the term shortcut, but when you understand the principles, as opposed to being shown a hold, whatever the hold is, and not being explained, not having that everything broken down and explained, when you really think about stopper toe holds and top wrist locks, double wrist locks, front face locks, they're all the same move. They're all gripped the same. Everything is the same. You try to keep those fundamentals functional, just keep everything. It's like a gross motor skill. And I think, at least in my life, or the way I was taught, that is a huge advantage. And that's not a time stopper. I mean, nothing's going to stop the hands of time from aging me, but just knowing I could be, just coming out of a coma and I would still remember probably how to just keep everything tight, or lower your weight or whatever, the principles are. So I'm very principle based. And when I see guys, and I give them credit for trying to be innovative and creative, when they start doing more acrobatic type of moves because it's flashy and it's an attention getter, well, it's not going to be functional. It's not going to last very long. You're going to be able to pull this stuff off for a short period of time in your life and in a very limited place. So let's stick with the bulwark. the hardcore grunt stuff, because that's going to last you a lifetime. But what I want to do, as I said, when I get back with you guys, and maybe not the first time, but once I get back into a frame of mind here where we can get something going, I want to start opening it up to things that just, that haven't been done before. You guys haven't seen, and maybe you've even had thoughts about shit that you'll see, and hopefully I can put it together for you, because yeah, I'm going to be ready for it, man. I'll tell you that right now. I miss you now. I wish we were all sitting together having some pizza and shit.
Yeah. I can already, my elbow's already hurting thinking about you coming to the,
Yeah, wait till other shit's gonna happen, So come on, ask some more questions, Joe. You're the guy normally talkative.
Yeah, for some reason I couldn't get a word in edgewise, Tony.
Talking to me?
No, yeah. No, but anyways, actually I do have a whole other line of questioning depending how much time we have. Chuck, I know you got to take off at some point, but let's take a step back to talk about Krav Maga a little bit, because I think most people who do martial arts are aware of it to some degree or not. I would say I know it stems from Israel, but maybe could you describe, like, how organized is it? Are there different lineages of it? So like if I were to tell someone I was in karate, well, there's a lot of different flavors of karate. Is it the same with Krav, or is the core curriculum pretty consistent? It sounds like you're able to improvise a little bit and throw some catch in there. So how does it all, I guess, what's the history? How is it organized? What are the ranks? Just kind of lay it out to me.
The quick history is, there was a guy named Emil Lichtenfeld, growing up in Europe, back in the just pre-World War II days. And Emi was, living in an area of Europe. He was Jewish, his family was Jewish, and they lived in these areas, when the Nazis started to invade Europe, not with military force, but they started making their presence felt. And Emi was a guy, the way his history was explained to me, Emi was a guy that was a boxer, a wrestler, a traditional martial artist, a gymnast. And when him and his family and his friends would get into these fights, these scuffles with these Nazis, he learned real quick that the stuff that he was learning in the sport gym and in the dojo and stuff didn't translate into self-defense. So he came up with this system. It's a very simplistic system. But him and his family living on the wrong side of the tracks in Europe in the pre-World War II days, they move to Israel. He's got a pretty good reputation at that point. Israel decides to start forming its first military. They approach him. They're like, hey, we need you to come up with a training program for everybody. Everybody's going to be inducted. So you're going to get athletes and you're going to get couch potatoes. You got to train them all in the same system so they can keep themselves safe. And you got 6 weeks to do it. And that's how it got actually started. He's a very analytical guy. He came up with a lot of stuff. Krav is, since it started, it's got its roots in the 1940s. It hasn't been around long enough for people to bastardize it and have all these different, lineages of it. The stuff we teach does have a little bit of an American flavor to it. And you do kind of freeform. So we do have levels, right? Krav is simplistic, so we have levels. There's no belts. You don't have a belt until you get to a certain instructor level. Then you're a black belt. That's only because Americans understand black belt to basically mean instructor. We have levels 1 through 5, and then we have black belt levels after that. And the levels are different in that they go over different threat levels. So level 1 is the most common one-on-one street attacks. A lot of chokes, takedowns, sucker punches, headlocks. Level 2, you start working a little bit on the ground. Another reason that I sought catch wrestling out is every system has a hole in it. Nothing is perfect. Krav, they don't teach you how to fight on the ground a whole lot. And they tell you not to go to the ground, and that's great. That's not always up to you. So you'll wind up on the ground. Police officers are taught, take people to the ground, because you take their legs away and they can't run and they can't do all that stuff. So you got to have some comfort and some technique on the ground. So as we go through the levels, the threat levels go up. 2, there's some ground stuff, some multiple attacker stuff. 3 and 4, the way we teach is all your weapon stuff, edged weapons, fire, pistols, sticks. By the time we get to level 5, we're doing some judo throws and defending judo throws and doing active shooter stuff. And it just goes up from there when you get into the black belt, first, second, third degree level. But you can freeform it. So going to one Krav Maga school is not going to be the exact same as going to another. A perfect example, I mix a shitload of catch wrestling into my Krav training where it's appropriate, where people can do simple things. I've melded that right into the Krav training. It's a system that's supposed to be, and for the most part, from what I've seen and what I've experienced over 12 or 13 years now, it is for everyone. It relies on simple movements that only require gross motor skills. So we don't teach any of the spinning head kicks and stuff like that. They're impractical and not everyone can do them. I've actually been in instructor training for the association that I'm certified through, the USKMA, and we've been doing things like simple wrist escapes and stuff like that. We've had small female instructors in the instructor classes who go, I can't do that. I can't get away. I can't do it. And they've scrapped it right there. They're like, okay, then that technique's out of our system. If everybody can't do it, we don't even want it. So it is adaptive, and instructors, just like anything else, have the ability to mix their own stuff into it. One of the things I mix into the higher levels is I'll mix in some firearm stuff, offensive, defensive, retention stuff, based on the experiences that I've had and the training that I've had. So it's pretty good, but it's not mirror image, of every school you're going to go to. You're not going to get the exact same thing.
Let me interject with a question then, if you know the answer. How did Krav get here? Who was the first Krav instructor in America? Do you know?
There were some instructors. It depends on who you talk to. People like, it's just like anything else. People like to take credit for being the first. But there were some people that either were trained in Israel and came over and they'll take credit for starting it over here. Or there's Americans that say they went over to Israel for the training and then brought it back.
Okay.
It could be either or a mixture of the two. One of the things I like about Krav is it doesn't worry about the lineage, right? Does your instructor know what he or she is doing?
Yeah.
Okay, then there's your instructor. That's another thing I like about it too. When I was doing the traditional stuff, you're always arguing about whose system of karate is better than the others. Hey man, is the instructor teaching you something worthwhile? That's all you care about then. Who cares? Lineage, I could care less about that. So
Is there like, when you get to the instructor level, is there some kind of like national test or recognition, like, standards, or is it kind of like instructor to instructor where like I say, my local guy, gives me the blessing?
So the association that I'm certified through, United States Krav Maga Association, and it's as instructors, so we have to go to instructor training to be an instructor. So like level 1 through 5, I took a test at my school, and that just made me a student from level 1 through 5. I had to go to the USKMA and get taught by their head instructor to become an instructor to actually teach those levels. And then when it comes to the black belt level, we can't award a black belt at a school under the USKMA system. They have to go to the USKMA. They have to be invited, take their black belt test there, and then they're awarded their black belts.
I don't know if you're able to divulge this, but like, what are the black belt tests like? Is that secretive, or is that kind of?
No, it's not secretive, Aldo. Hell, you could probably go on YouTube and find me taking parts of my black belt test if you look at United States Krav Maga Association. Mark Slane, the head instructor of the United States Krav Maga Association, what he'll do is from time to time when he has enough people that he'll invite you to a gym. And I took mine at a gym in St. Louis. It's a 6-hour test. So they run you through everything you learn through the first 5 levels and then the black belt material. The thing about Krav tests is when you go to take your level 1 test, it's basically an hour long because you do all your level 1 stuff. When you go to take your level 2 test, it's 2 hours long because you do all your level 1, all your level 2. By the time you get to the black belt, it's about 6 hours. And it was a test that I've done a lot of stuff in my life, and I was proud to pass that test just from a physical standpoint because it was 6 hours, and there is a lot of sparring. stand up on the ground in combination. You know, I had the way I ended my 6 hour test was I was put in a cage with a heavyweight UFC fighter and had to spar him. I mean, it was just it's just an accomplishment when you do it. There's nothing secretive about it. The only time people won't talk about Krav tests is because they don't want to scare away students, tell them about a 6 hour test. I think when I took that test, I think we all weighed ourselves before. I think I weighed like 227. And then when I weighed myself after the 6 hours, I was at 196.
Wow.
Holy Christ.
I was cramping up. I cramped up at one point doing a session rolling around on the ground. I thought I tore my Achilles tendon. That's how bad my calves were cramping up. So, but at the end, you're like, hey, man, I got through that. So,
So like if you went to like, if you were to go to Israel and go into a Krav class, you're thinking it'd be pretty consistent with what you're seeing
it would,
here?
I would say it would be tougher. I would say it had to be tougher over there than here. It's tough here, but it is an Americanized version, right? We water it down because 99.99% of the people we train are not military personnel. They're not even law enforcement personnel. They're people wanting to learn self-defense and get into shape. So it is Americanized a little bit. It doesn't mean the techniques are any different, but just the way it's trained. You know, we're not going to be living in barracks like, you know, in the Marine Corps and training every morning for 6 hours and then training for 2 more hours at night. That's just not the way, you know, it's done over here. So it'd probably be tougher over there, at least from a physical standpoint. I think I'd probably have most of the technique stuff down. It would just be the physical aspect that would be much tougher.
So it's primarily still military over there.
Yeah.
that
Oh,
does
yeah.
it.
It's all in Israel. They don't distinguish between military and law enforcement. Everybody over there has to serve. It just depends on where they stick you, where they assign you. So yeah, it's primarily still. I'd have to imagine it's still military over there.
I guess that's true. Yeah, everybody does serve over there, like a
Yep.
short stint. So yeah,
Yep.
there's
There's
no
a lot of
distinction.
countries are like that. They have the mandatory service, you know.
Yeah. So here it's more of
Like a civilian level.
it's more of a civilian level. We teach. I've had military personnel. I've had actually quite a few law enforcement officers and agents, but that's not the majority of your students. You know, it's people looking for self-defense and you know, we do run through stuff. We run through active shooter. We do all that kind of stuff. But it's just not a military-based system here because we're not all in the military. Some of us were, some of us never have been and never will be. So, you know, we all kind of train at the same level now. And the stuff after the black belt level, it's all like think tank stuff. We don't sweat nearly as much. Like when I went to take my 2nd-degree black belt test, it was like a think tank. You know, you do techniques and all that. We spent a whole day on an outdoor range doing a lot of firearm stuff, but it's more of like, that's at the point where you start trying to add to their curriculum. You know, I bring up catch wrestling stuff. I'm like, look at this. This is Krav Maga on the ground or Krav Maga standing and attached to each other, right? So it's that type of thing once you get to the upper levels. Plus, I'm going on 53 and I need a knee replacement. I don't need any more 6 hour tests. You know, sparring with people in a cage for the majority of that. So
I really like that. It really tries to be not only a practical martial art, but like really full spectrum. You know, like you start, you know, striking, there's grappling and even weapons, you know. So you really try to, you know, if people stick with it, they are getting exposed to just about everything. I guess I'll make a comment. Or one of my impressions, and I don't, like I said, it's just stuff through like online TV and YouTube. But I don't know if you've ever seen it. There used to be this show where these two guys would go around and try different martial arts around the world, and they ended up at Israel and they did the Krav Maga. And one of the things that really is stuck with me, you know, because one of the guys was an MMA fighter, and they put him into a scenario, a Krav drill, where he was like simulating walking down the street, and the guy, you know, ambushes and runs at him. And he clinches him in a tie clinch, and starts to throw knees, which, like, you know, in a single combat self-defense, unarmed, was perfect. You know, he was going to tear this guy up, but the guy had like a simulated knife and was just shanking him repeatedly. You know, he didn't have control of his hands while he's doing that, and he would have paid with his life. And it was kind of really a very clear distinction for me of, like, you know, the difference between sport, even if it's very tough,
Sorry.
a very tough combat sport, you know, with a high level combat athlete, if he's not trained to think this guy could be carrying a knife, he could lose his life to a much inferior athlete.
Yeah, one of the things, and I don't like to harp on sport fighters because there's some good athletes, some good fighters, in various sport fighting, but it's just it's a different practical application. I tell people, when we're training in the Krav, I go, well, we'll do something like that example I used earlier. We'll have one student flat on their back and another student in the mount. So when I'm demonstrating something like that, I'm like, if I was an MMA fighter in a cage, this is a pretty good dominant position for me. As long as I know the guy underneath me is the only guy I'm fighting on the street, that's not guaranteed. So I can't camp in this position. I got to do my stuff and get up, and I got to worry about other people. I've been in those scenarios where you've been on the ground with a guy in a hallway of an apartment building, and then all of a sudden everybody starts popping out of their apartments, and you got to understand what's going on. They don't like you because you're the police. They like him because he sells them their drugs. So when these other people get involved, they're not going to be helping me. They're going to be helping him.
Yep.
You just have to understand what you're training for. MMA fighters, they train and they're fantastic athletes and they're good fighters. And, they train. Muay Thai fighters, boxers, they train for certain things. And I train for something different. So,
in the Tyson Fury fight over the weekend, his opponent claimed afterwards that Tyson Fury did an illegal move, right?
mhm.
Well, I didn't see the fight. I don't know if he did or he didn't, but that's very key because that's happened countless times throughout the history of boxing where boxers will do a quote unquote illegal move to get the drop on the opponent. So, and that's kind of indicative of what Chuck's saying here, that sport fighting, these guys are terrific. That's, they're high level, they're elite. But they can fall victim to something that happens when it's outside of the rules, something they're not expecting. And that's the thing for the street fighters or street scenarios, you got to expect the unexpected. And one other thing, before I had to go feed my mom, and I noticed, Joe, that I think you mentioned those two kids that travel the world with the martial arts. A little bit of inside trivia. Well, you met Kevin. You guys all knew Kevin from the tool and die shop. Well, Kevin's brother, Jeff, I'm not sure if either one of you had met him. He had died shortly before Kevin. He was younger than Kevin. Well, he dated the skinny kid's mother.
Oh, what do you know?
Yeah. He dated her for quite a bit. The skinny kid's mother. I never met the kids, or I only watched the show like once or twice. But yeah, a little bit of small world kind of shit.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, coach, I'm like, I call it like mental roadblocks, right? So if I'm working out with a boxing coach, and you go to, not only is a boxing coach not going to teach me to kick somebody in the groin or kick their knees, but when I go to do it, they're going to stop me and go, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And if they tell me 10,000 times, don't do it, I'm going to run into that roadblock when it's time to do it. The perfect example is when I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a while, and I'd be doing some stuff that I learned in catch or in traditional Jiu-Jitsu, and I'd be, say, like grabbing fingers. Stop. You can't manipulate a small joint. I'm like, I remember one of the first times I trained with Tony Cecchine, him bending my fingers all the way, touching my forearm with it. And he's like, welcome to catch wrestling. So it's just, you just have to understand what you're training for. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a great art, but I tell people, for me personally, I was told way more what I couldn't do than what I could do. And it just, it caused me to look for something else.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I always said. There are no rules here. That's the only rule we have in what I teach. There are no rules. But yeah, everybody has their purpose. And for example, with me, I'm so violent oriented, I guess, kind of like the Krav thing, that it's not for everybody. They'd rather do the softer aspect of it where you can win by pin or whatever. It don't matter. The other thing that I've noticed, I used to be a historian of sorts, of all martial arts. I used to have a large collection of books, and they're all gone now. Most of them are gone, sadly, through no fault of my own, just something happened. And I really used to dig into the books and read and watch the pictures and read the articles. And there are there were some validity things, that I could, what am I trying to say? There was some violence underneath all of the
Mhm.
pretty photos, okay? That if you look a little bit deeper, you'd see. For example, Chinese China, a lot of nice. Now that's not a killing sport or killing martial art, but a lot of the joint manipulations are, quote unquote killer, man. They're nice.
Yeah.
Okay, small joint manipulations. I remember seeing some old, let's call it pre-World War II kind of judo or jiu-jitsu, Japanese judo, jujitsu, I guess they would call it. And they would call their moves tricks. Okay. This is trick number one, trick number two. And some of them were actually pretty good. I thought that maybe you could tighten it up. But again, there was some underlying reality there, which is what I really liked. Because I guess I just never was into the movie
Yeah.
star kind of martial arts stuff. That never appealed to me.
Yeah, that never appealed to me either, coach. Like I said, my biggest goals to this day are, I mean, I consider martial arts a hobby, but I'm probably not a martial artist in the hobby sense like most people are that are involved in martial arts, My main goals, once again, were always to learn self-defense and law enforcement control and teach those things to other people. But some of that stuff too, like another one of my instructors, a guy that I earned my traditional jujitsu black belt through, Gil Hernandez, out here in West Chicago. He teach a lot of those chin na things, and some of those I used in the real world. Some of those, I was teaching someone the other day when I was in uniform, which wasn't the majority of my career, but I did spend a few years in uniform. Every once in a while, you have guys do something stupid, like they grab your badge. It's like an authority thing. There'd be quick lockups where you get these guys. It's not a legal scenario where you can just start throwing punches and elbows.
Sure.
You can't. You can definitely physically deal with this guy, but you can't escalate it past his level of use of force. You got to deal with it, on his level. Some of that chin na stuff, and then some of the top wrist lock stuff later on. The stuff worked. You just have to know what's the purpose of your training. Not everybody's, all of our purposes are not the same. Some of us train for different things. So you just have to know what it is. And there are people out there that are martial artists. They train for everything. They self-defense, sport fighting, and that's great. But for me, it was always those couple of things, self-defense and law enforcement control. And now later on, being able to teach those things to people.
Well, I want to see you coach. I actually want to watch one day, just not even participate, just sit and watch, because I'm certain you're an excellent coach.
I appreciate that.
I can tell.
I do. Like I said, I like being an instructor. I like passing it along. And that's something I've always gotten from you and from all my instructors. I've mentioned a bunch of names on this podcast, and you get something from everybody, right? And sometimes you get one small thing from somebody that's usable. Sometimes you get the only thing you'll get from people, because I honestly believe you learn something from everybody that you ever meet in your entire life. Sometimes you learn what not to do.
Yeah.
But like some of the people that I've mentioned here today, it's been like a storehouse of knowledge. This is stuff that I have used over and over practically. I've used it to train my students. And, the 4 or 5 names that I've mentioned, and right at the top of the list is Coach C, Coach Tony. It's there. If it's there, make use of stuff that's useful. That's what I try to do.
Well, we'll talk offline, if not tonight, because I know that we're going to have to wrap this up, because you've got an appointment, but we'll talk soon. Even the 3 of us will do a Zoom again privately. But I just want to say to anybody that's locally here, Chicagoland, reach out to Chuck and try to hook up with him too for training. We also always mention Jason Bender, and Josh Piscini, and Chuck May's added to that, because I'm telling you, people, he's got the real world experience and stuff. He's a student of the game. His brain is involved. He's just not an athlete. Okay. It's beyond being athletic. It's the mental. He's got the brain for it. Okay. He doesn't have the looks of a Joe Cardinal, but who does?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, who does?
Right.
And I really got to rely on the brains these days because the athletic part, man, that's going away fast. So
Well, what I mean is you are a good athlete, at least when last time I saw you, but people who are out there that may not think they're athletic, you don't need to. Chuck's got the brain and he can articulate his thoughts quite well. So I highly recommend people, especially around the DuPage County or western part of Chicago, go for it. Joe, do you have any closing thoughts? Because again, I always have to, you get mad if I don't brag about your looks.
Well,
So
thank you. I
in.
appreciate that. I was waiting, Tony. I was starting to feel a little sore, but yeah, you pulled it
Okay.
out there at the end and I appreciate it. Well, in closing, Chuck, great guest. Thanks for all your insight. It was
We'll have
awesome.
you back, Joe.
hey,
Chuck.
anytime you guys want, I'm always up for whatever you guys want to do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Awesome. And just how do people find you? So
there is the name of the school that we work out at. It's called DuPage Krav Maga. There is a Facebook, an Instagram page, and a website under those names. We also do some training through RJM Strategy Group, and same thing, website, Facebook, Instagram. And I haven't seen them quite as much as I'd like to since the pandemic hit, but I train and we do some grappling at West Chicago Park District with Sensei Gil Hernandez. So those are,
Email that to Joe and he can put that in the description.
yeah. And then as soon as Coach C is free and clear, we're gonna be doing some stuff out with him too. So,
Yeah, we're going to get it cooking, man, with
Yeah.
gas. Well, thank you again. And everybody that's listening or watching or watching, I want to thank all of you guys as well. And of course, thank you, Joe. And you guys are going to get this released on May 1st. So we're through another month.
yeah, as soon as you're free, I'll start warming up my knees and elbows and ankles and everything right now to take the punishment. So
Good. All right, guys. Well, thank you for watching, everybody. And we'll see you next week on the Snap and Tap podcast.
Thank you.